want to move us to that?
Yes. Thank you. So I'm going to give a short report on the Bill Moline program, and you have kind of the too long didn't read version in front of you there if you want to see kind of our little executive summary. I think you also have the full report with the exhibits. So I'm going to reference those exhibits as we go through this in case you want to see specifics. As you know, we were presented a few months back with this idea from Alderperson Timian about Bill Moline, the idea of building starter houses, the city doing those, the city financing those, possibly taking even a loss on those, but the idea of really understanding that the market is not producing those and that the city should consider it. So we really took that idea, pulled out little parts of it, and examined those, because they are going to help us in other development field that we're working on right now. We did learn some things out of this process regardless of that. Then provide you with some recommendations at the end of ways you could go forward with this. So as I mentioned, the first thing we want to do is really define what is a starter house. So we're looking at an 1,100 square foot model. Could maybe have a basement or a garage, but the examples you're going to see in here don't have that. And it all kind of comes down to the specific amount of money you have, what makes the most sense for buying it, right? The targeted buyers, when we think about the Bill Moline program, when we think about starter houses, targeted buyers are going to be a young couple looking to start a family, elderly retirees looking to downsize, or maybe single professionals. That was kind of the idea. There was also the idea of like building these on city-owned lots. So we took a good hard look at city-owned lots. Roughly 70 lots that say they're owned by the city of Moline, they are owned by the city of Moline. But when it comes down to it, I would say maybe 2 of those are buildable right now as far as like, yes, this is a buildable lot. I feel great if I can go out there and try to put something on. So the point is you can look through that exhibit B, you can see all those lots, and basically there's a story behind every single one of those, whether it's a ravine, you think it may have been dumped on in the past, as landfill, other things that maybe make it not the most ideal lot to build a house on. And of course, we did not include Case Creek and some of the city's farms for that. Of course, but that is something to keep in mind. The city has 3 farms south of the airport that are at least 70 acres of segregation. So I'm going to kick it over to Charles here right now, because one of the things that Charles looked at for us, and like you said, Mayor, he was our intern this year, our abundance intern, and worked on this project. He looked at the privately owned lots. And so, Charles, you want to add something on private lots and what you were able to find on them?
Yeah, so given, depending on if you don't want to go with publicly owned lots, you want to see if privately held lots would be an option. So we started off with a list of around 300 privately held vacant lots from Todd that he assembled using ArcGIS, and I went through and whittled it down more so that we can, okay, if we have a lot of lots, but we can't put a single family development in which are buildable at all. In the end, we found that there's a good deal of them that would work for the program, around 80 that I would consider buildable, and within that, like around 20 that are really buildable and pretty perfect for the program. Now, some of them did say that had to pay money to get them. Acquiring them wouldn't necessarily be simple, but it's just something to pass it back to Chris.
Okay. So also we looked at kind of the economics of building a house as part of this, right? There's a couple different elements to look at. One was floor plans. I know there was a desire from certain folks on the council, and Alderperson Timian pitched the idea of having housing plans that are ready to go. Basically, someone comes down and says, here's a pre-approved plan. Talking to the building official about that, one thing I would tell you is building a house is kind of similar to a garage, where we don't need a full plan from an architect, right? So we can certainly have these plans on file. That's important to the city council. We can do it. But what we do for garages, for example, is like a garage packet. You really kind of answer these questions about your garage. We can permit it just from that. So another thing we can think about as staff, I mean, it's an obvious reason why we don't have a house packet. It's not something to get a real request for a lot. But we could kind of change the game and be prepared with some kind of packet to help people, pre-approve through the process. But I did just want to make sure everybody knows, like, you don't need an architect for a house. Really can design it fairly simply. And the other thing is that typically the type of to see for that is usually somebody who's, but I'm closer to 250 a square foot with most of the people I talk to. So I think 250 a square foot is a realistic price for a new house. Obviously, certain things in economies of scale are going to differ with that. And then the top one is a public prevailing wage. So we did want to look at, in case the city council does want to guarantee that prevailing wage is paid for the job. Now we're looking at roughly 308 square foot is what we estimate for that. How does that change the bill? Usually the plumber and the electrician are going to be getting prevailing wage anyway. So it's really going to be those others in the job that would get it first. The other jobs that would typically get that higher wage. And we also show you here some of the comparisons to like Habitat for Humanity, how they build it. Obviously, they've got some reduced costs in their labor with the volunteers. And so that'll bring me back down to Charlie. Charlie looked at the household contribution to the city. So another thing that Alderperson Timian pointed out was you can be prepared to lose a little bit on building a house because these are new residents. They're, paying for utilities, they're paying property taxes, they're going to your stores. So Charles, you took a look at that. You want to break that down a little bit?
Yeah, just as Chris said, part of the program is intended to be fiscally solvent generally. So seeing how we're going to recoup the money, the tax revenue over time. I just started with the general tax category that the city ends up making money from, mainly sourcing stuff from the code of ordinances as well as the annual comprehensive financial report. Very general estimate, I would peg it at around 3,500. That's based on a few things. We're not counting money going to other taxing bodies like school districts or the county in this. It's just the city of Moline. And yeah, a lot of that money is property tax, obviously, a lot of it in sales tax. As you see, though, a lot of it's in what the state ends up giving out of the tax revenue they collect. Some of that is per capita instead of spending, and some of that is just kind of exists regardless, like the personal property replacement tax. And then you have a lot of utilities and charges that go to it. So I'm sure this very rough estimates, making mistakes in here, but for the most part, you see benefit. And we go down to the mortgage income analysis. Obviously, we're shooting for attainable housing here. So we want to see what the market we're actually looking at is depending on the house price that we're putting at. So one of the goals is to be at around that 180,000 range based on the pro forma, the initial building report. And we find that when we calculate all the expenses, assuming a housing cost estimate of 25 to 35% of gross income, which is generally what is advised, you get around a $67,000 to $95,000 for the buyer. If you want to read the calculations for tax, that's going to be in the exhibits of the information.
And that does shed some light a little bit when you realize that, okay, somebody's got to be making above median income to be able to afford that starter house. These are important things to know. So we came out of this with some recommendations, realities, whatever you want to call these, but I think you have some options, right? So one option would be, hey, we found a couple lots that we could build on, let's just go start doing it. We mentioned we got some higher wages you probably would have to pay. Does it end up being a $300,000 house? Is that lot ideal for it, right? And so that's one of the options that you could do. Another thing we realized here, we really could consider building duplexes, fixing our codes a little bit to be able to build more duplexes or something, even more dense than that. We realized that a couple of the properties that are really most suitable for development that aren't farms are a couple that are downtown. So you'd be building a different type of building if you could, right? You'd be building something that had a storefront possibly downtown or something that was more dense. Not really what the program is intended to be, but just something we realized. The fourth option, and I think this has the most support probably from the working group that's been looking at some budget and really for me, is to consider a subordinate mortgage program. This is like what exhibit F is attached to your report there. This would be taking $500,000 roughly, saying let's become the second mortgage on these. Let's have a subordinate mortgage program. We go in and we support the building of the house through like a $50,000 second mortgage. So you can kind of see on exhibit F how that's laid out, how that could possibly work. Want to know more about it? We could have Chris even. He's got like the table in there. We can play with some of those numbers to show you how we can tweak those things. So it's not saying that that's the way the program has to be, showing you an idea. And for example, like, does that second mortgage have to be something that's forgivable? So maybe the house is sold and maybe they pay a portion on that loan, but just a small portion of it. Maybe it's something that it just sits there and 10 years that 50,000 comes off, right? The city has got a new house out of it. Got 10 years of that 3,500, right? So we got maybe $35,000 of these other benefits of having the house there. So our recommendation would be to take 500,000. You have that in a special housing fund right now, right? So you could take 500,000, have a subordinate mortgage program where you really do work with the buyer, work with the bank to get the 80% first mortgage, and try and get 9 to 10 houses built that way, assuming that they're not going to exceed that $50,000 cost. And then, of course, the final recommendation here was recommending partnering with nonprofits, which is something that we always look to do, but could do it in a more formal way. So, and then there's a final, I guess, south of the airport, but I know that wasn't really what was for this program. This was intended to be years ago. So happy to take any questions on that. If you want to talk more about Exhibit F, well, we can do that. But just ready to get some feedback here.
On page 7, when we go over builder types, I didn't notice this until tonight. You list city prevailing wage at 144 per square foot. What is that? Is that the city, like, public works building it?
This, I believe, is a renovation. I think this is the example of like renovation. Okay.
Yeah, this is not new construction. So, and a question I asked with this loan program is would have to guarantee it only for new construction, and we need to have banks and builders in line to do it, because I think all the best programs in the world fall flat because there's no one lined up to do it. And so, thoughts about that?
And one thing I missed too is we have to start probably for our land banking operations taking more lots. We'll demo a lot now and not take a lot, but I think one part would be like get some more lots, which Brad already has identified a couple that are coming down the line and maybe help us.
Do we have banks? Are there builders? And frankly, by us owning lots, we're knocking the price down by 5,000 to 10,000, right? So that's still helping the bottom line. If assuming this machine is working.
You want to talk, Chris, a little bit about banks you've talked to already about this concept?
So yeah, on the builders, so we could offer procurement, for home builders, we could put this program forth and solicit those who participate in this program out there. So that's that concept of 1 or 2 builders stable, ready to participate in this specific program. And then it also helps us with, you talk about the housing management price per square foot, so they become our partner as our delivery. And I don't know if we need to, and then on the lender side, I don't know if we need to say procure is just a program that's out there because we're making a fairly static Polish program. We reviewed with a couple banks and those benefits that unique. There's different forms of this that exist. As long as, and that's the whole point, it has to be subordinate as long as we're behind the our subordination will show up. Behind the primary lender, they'll show up on the equity side of the buyer. So we're strengthening that home buyer's ability to secure the primary loan. And so we lower the hurdle opportunity. We also talked about being able to use that, use it and rinse it once to then bring forward this morning. We could bring that into the construction period as well. So that we are doing the same thing on construction for builder, again, banks comfortable with their guarantees and present as a construction loan that matures as construction period, it would improve period. into scope. The same.
Is that essentially a way that people who might be on the earlier side of their home building?
From the primary care standpoint, from their underwriting of that will work. But that's where there's gonna be a need for, you go to a bank and say, we got a supported mortgage program, like, okay, great. Sounds fantastic, excited to see it. We have a program for a supporting construction loan. They're still gonna be highly, they will really review the because the risk is significant in construction period. So it's not as impactful on the construction loan, except it does help lower the cost of carry, the cost of construction loan interest, lowers the price of the home.
Yeah, I guess I was really saying, because Chicago did this with their Built Southwestern. It's called, where they like prioritized people who are not, already massively known quantities in the building industry. It was like, it's an attempt to support entrepreneurship. That's what I was asking. That
It
kind of
strengthens their
program
position.
helps a newer builder or someone that's smaller than the homes that are not. Helps them take a chance on doing that.
Yes.
Is this something that would be possible to stack with our other housing programs, like our our first time homebuyer assistance that we do, or would we keep them separate, or?
So we did talk about first time home buyer, right? I think it's ideal for there. Some of the other programs, maybe not so, because could tie to certain census tracts for low income, they might have to be under a certain income. We haven't thought about first time home buyer. KJ's been part of those conversations, so if there's ways to bring the other programs, you can certainly do that too. But to me, I mean, this is my ideal thing for the first time home buyer program. I think if you look on Exhibit F, we have included, well, we included residence portion, so you can imagine that portion being maybe more simple.
I think I saw your hand.
Faster.
Okay.
The pre-approved plan concept, whereas I understand it might not expedite permitting, which is great to hear that it's so like, here's a sketch, here's what we're gonna do. If we have pre-approved plans that the city purchased and available for builders are gonna come in and build the same house over and over again, they don't have to then invest the money. And that in theory will translate to a slightly lower cost. So that was like, this could be something that helps generations of people with a one-time investment. So that's where that comes.
And in some ways, it helps the city, even though there's not form-based code across the entire city, right? It does help with how things are meant to look to blend into whatever neighborhood you're looking at, right? If we had pre-approved plans that sort of work anywhere with our historic town that has it, you can see the phases of development and of the style, etc. As you go west. So are you saying that, the staff really does need sort of some more direction on what's the most attractive about what's left with what they've weighed in on, I think, and it sounds like there's excitement being generated by the subordinate loan program, because at the very least you are helping more people get into the house. But I don't want to speak for the.
Well, I like it for half of the pot we have, and if it works, we can maybe, what I don't like is that it's not refilling its own pot as quickly as I'd hoped. But at the end of the day, we're trying to get more housing, and so and the reason Bettendorf built so much is because they're heavily subsidized by local and state governments. So
They have room to build.
well, there's that. So I would say I like that for half. I still like the idea of us building on some of the lots we have if we can just do that. Just because movement is better than stagnation. I don't know. And then like the terms of the supporting one program, I think we could argue about later. But that's just if we can build 2 houses, get started this year, that's bulldozers. In a sense.
Were those buildable lots that we have identified reviewed for just a single family development or also for duplexes as well?
Most of them, if they're zone R2, code. Right? But we have infill standards that we have on books or don't. That's the John Deere Middle School lot is an interesting one because it's a larger lot.
Right.
And it was the one that rose to the top for me until engineering, Laura took a look at it, she's like, this is right next to here. So then it was kind of the first thing I started with it, like a year ago. That is weird. So that's got the most opportunity to be divided up and get a lot of units there, good density. Maybe it just takes to spending money and doing the geotechnical or something and just see what's underneath there or.
Because I know
Go ahead.
that I'm coming at it from is, I don't feel like there's a ton of opportunity for the city to explode with single family residential because we are landlocked in many regards. So I think if we're trying to use this program, like set an example of housing, I think the example we're trying to set is density. So if I were to want to move forward with building anything, I think I would be more inclined to say, here's a duplex and it's new and it's nice, and this is what these neighborhoods should look like. I prefer that than like doing a willy-nilly one or two houses, single family on these random lots. So it's more of like an exhibit pilot project of like, here's what the city could look like with higher density.
I think that is well aligned with the updates we just made, right? Didn't we just make some this year to make it easier to build duplexes?
For non-conforming units, we did. We know where we would envision that our comprehensive plan is going to have some of these things, right?
Yeah. I appreciate that perspective. I think density is the key, and new construction is the key for the buyer.
I have no problem pursuing into duplex spaces as well. I think it's something that's a big long approach. I think looking at the two lots that are listed as recommended, I'm not sure those are going to be big enough for duplex. Just look, there are places where there used to be homes there pretty clearly, and so putting a home back there makes a lot of sense. They're just regular neighborhoods with kind of that same size of home. I would love to see us moving forward with trying a few of those, right? I mean, we're putting up a certain amount of risk and a certain amount of work to push into, and you might turn to the end and say, nope, that's too much work. It's not getting us enough like juice for the squeeze. But I also think that doing that on two lots is probably a number of steps. I think I was a little surprised when I was first reading through the report of talking about like, oh, we don't have so many lots that we own that we could build on for all the right reasons. But I also appreciated the comment in there, 80 available, 20 that were like ready in private lots. If this program was successful on those first two lots, we then talk about, is it worth it to go pursue buying those lots then? I mean, I don't envision this program ever getting over 3, 4, maybe 5 a year. I mean, it's going to be 10 years before we get through that whole list. And more might be available. So I don't want us to stop. This is always going to be a slow thing. And I think there's very low risk in the way we sort of set this out to try to ensure. Hey, so I'd like to see us moving forward with some of that.
We'll go down.
My comment was just on the duplex. I agree. Duplexes are a good idea. I guess my only question is how that would work as far as the sale of these properties and basically the income property for the buyer that would have to be owner occupied. So I don't know how the program would work out with a duplex.
Another thing to consider along those lines, one of the 3rd Street A, 600 block of 3rd Street A, you go up it is the Moline development. There's about 10 lots sitting there right now on the lawn. So that's an example of where you develop that neighborhood unit attached, right? You probably would have 2 units attached together, so they could be on their own lot. They could be set up where somebody owns each one of those units. But the cost, the economies of scale that you choose to build it could be like you're saving money. So that's one option. I'm not saying it has to be the option, but that's one thing we learned going through this. It's like, oh, there's 10 lots sitting here that are addressed. Let's store this. So that's why we also kind of said maybe it's a 3-plex, maybe it's
like the idea of the duplex. I also agree with James. You said that there were 2 or 20 lots that were available that we can do right now.
20 units referring to 5 million. As far as ones that the city has right now, So I think there's maybe two that I feel really good about right now, saying let's go build on this. But I think my favorite one we don't even know yet. That's the next one that Brad's trying to really like demo.
Mr. Tim-
I will say, when the story broke on this, I had a number of residents try to sell me their lots because people don't know what to do with it. So they started emailing me, and I got Brad involved. Some are good candidates. There's some off of 41st Street that I think it's been an empty lot forever, and they're really good for multi-unit. I think that they're close to schools. Would be really great candidates for that. I do think the multi-pronged approach is accurate. We need to approach this in multiple ways. We build some. We do the loan program for others and get builders to build, because momentum creates more momentum. And I think if we can think about it like that, duplexes, I would love nothing but new duplexes all over. And we've talked about you can condoize them so they can get ownership and equity. And so we don't have to sell it to someone who's going to rent it back. We could sell it to individual owners.
Sounds like I'm hearing support for exploring multiple directions here, and I'm wondering if staff could come up with, like basically a triage plan, right? You have a lot, you decide what its symptoms are, right? And then you put it in the right treatment plan, whether it's duplex, single family, it's multi-unit. And maybe that's a system we already had, we just needed to be more organized or orderly, or think about it from some newer angles versus like big builders and certain size home and all that kind of thing. So I don't think there's anything lost. It sounds like to me anyway. It's a good study. Thank you for the time. Thank you, Mr. Anderson, for helping with this project and providing some good perspective on it. So Chris, you heard subordinate loan program,
Yes.
multiple tracks, or the multi-pronged approach.
Yes. I do want to say thanks to my staff too. I know Brad did a lot of work on these lots. KJ got the information together great too. So thanks to everyone who contributed, Charles.
Great. So it's probably then the council could expect another report before the end of the year about this triage plan, like how we pull it all together. Maybe it sounds to me like you've got firm ideas for banks, but there's also banks with Moline that that have representation and on that board that probably should be approached. So Charles, we want to thank you. This was probably your last meeting with us unless you follow the progress of this next phase. So good. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, it's been great. Thanks. Thank you so much for affording me this opportunity. I've had a great time. Yeah, just thank you all so much.
Yep, and good luck with the upcoming semester.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Charles.
Bye-bye. Thank you very much. And thank you also to Alex Elias, who's here for supervising and helping answer questions, running down information, and being a part of the team. Yeah, you want to say something? Oh, okay. All right, we'll move to our fee review then. Ms. Barnes.
Right, thank you, Runner. 85 years, the city conducts a comprehensive review of all of our charges for services to ensure that they come close to covering our costs and that they're aligned with other surrounding. I want to make a special note that the fee reviews that we're doing tonight are in addition to the fee review of the 4 price month that we just did here. We are not looking for any council action tonight. We simply want to share the results of the review and answer any questions that you may have regarding our recommendations. Final fee review and direction of our future adoption by council roundtable with our fee schedule for September. For this year's review, our accounting intern, Lois Smith, led the charge working with managers in our finance department, as well as all directors and various staff throughout the city. This was one of the primary projects that we're all working on this summer. And we are very happy to share the final recommendations with you. Since the proposed increased revenues may go a long way in helping us balance the upcoming 2027 budget. This is Roland's third year working for us as an accounting intern. She is currently attending Bradley University, majoring in accounting, minor in business management. And she's going to be leaving us the end of the month to study abroad in Spain. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Roland. Thank you.
So as Carol said, this has been one of my primary projects. My internship, I've been here since early May or mid-May. And so I started this project on July 7th, and I proposed to the directors that we would be proceeding with this plan. Overall, we've been doing this for just over a month now, accumulating this presentation, and then it will obviously continue after I'm gone. So in total, we reviewed 180 fees within the city and are proposing 34 recommended for increase or structural change. 29 of those fees are projected to generate $67,672 themselves. And then specifically something that we will highlight and focus on as well is 5 EMS fees that are projected to generate approximately $700,000. Primarily paid through insurance, which we will discuss when we get to fire. The purpose of this fee review is to ensure that our fees remain consistent with the city ordinance and are thorough and department by department review of what city charges we have. The methodology that we used for this fee review is going through ordinances, cross department collaboration because several fees involve other departments. And also just ensuring consistency and integrity within the fees that we are charging to our residents. And then there was a lot of cross communication, and looking through fee sheets, you will see that there are ordinance references, cost justification, as well as some fees have additional supporting commentary that might have needed further explanation for the fees. The way that I'm hoping to run this tonight will be that I will help with an overview of each department, give you an idea of how many fees they have, what's being proposed for the future, and the revenue impact, and then department heads are here to answer any questions, as well as myself and some of their staff. So, and then if you have any questions that come up that's for a department that we already have, we will leave questions also at the end to kind of go over. So the first 2 departments that we have are Parks and Fire. They are not here tonight, but this is just to touch on their fees that are approved yearly by their board, and they go up pretty consistently. So those are in the first 2 pages of your packet as desired.
Is the aquatics admission gone up this year or last year, or is it staying?
It's staying. I do believe
It's still lower than where. I don't know what the council thinks, but I don't think going over $10 for.
So with that, our first department is police. They have a total of 7 fees with a recommended increase of 5 fees, starting on page 3 of your package. Their total revenue impact, if all 5 fees are raised in the future study for 2027, is $16,275. The primary of those generating the most money would be an increase if we did false alarms.
I think it's because of Chief's relationship to parades that I want to ask this question.
Oh, it's alarm. She said alarm.
I think it's relevant here, but one of the conversations that has come up with Innovation Project mayors that is actually maybe going to be one of our future conversations in the next conference is the fact that everyone is in cities across the country are having nonprofits have a very difficult time affording any of the public parades that they used to have in the past. We know, what has gone into making the parade in place with Mercado for Dia de los Muertos, and I said, that's been one of our ways of containing either the safety or the cost, but what do we need to know so that either we as council members can communicate to nonprofits or the city staff is communicating that it's not just nonprofits, but any organization that just doesn't have this big bankroll for whatever the costs are to put on a traditional parade. Are you aware of other things besides a parade in place that communities are doing, or I guess I'm asking a pretty wide open question. It seems like we're talking about fees and impact to the community. It's kind of like one of those hidden things that unless you're trying to put on an event, you don't really know how it's gonna be.
Yeah, so, I guess I'll start with the expense, and the liability related to parades. Certainly, before I got here, it was a little bit of the wild west of the parade routes. We had several different of them, and many of those were really difficult to manage. And so, with the council's approval, of course, we pared those down, and we have routes that are now much more manageable, and the costs are known. And so they have a couple of different options for those. The only one that is an outsider to that is the high school parade. So we generally know what that cost is.
What is that?
Depending on the route, I mean, it could be a couple $1,000s for police protection. The more intersections, the more police we have to have. The potential impacts on public works as well, barricades and bollards. The city has invested a lot of money to try to reduce those expenses and improve the safety of parades. So as you know, we bought numerous bollards that cost well over $150,000 in previous budget years. To one, reduce the potential of an errant vehicle, a bad actor, just an accident, to provide safety to those people, but also then reduce the number of people that have to be at those locations, to divert vehicles and stuff like that, or put our own vehicles in place. So the city has fronted a lot of that expense to try to make it better and safer. But I think we also have to understand that parades are extremely high liability for the city. They're a city function on a city street, and they're being attacked all across the country. Bad actors or an accidental incident, and one of those is going to hit a liability fund of 2, 3, 4, 5 million, maybe more. And so I think there's a balance there that we have to try to strike to protect the city, protect the spectators of those, but still provide a fun environment. I think what you're doing, I think Bass Street has been phenomenal. It's very easy to secure for us. The cost is very minimal, and it's a great festival and parade location. I think we should continue to promote that. And again, I'm not the parks director, but from a safety standpoint, that is an ideal place. And I've met with Chris Barr and Chris Mathias about the future plans for the riverfront, and we've talked about building some of those features in there, crime prevention through environmental design, to make those spaces basically self-secure themselves, so we don't have to put as much stuff there. So I don't know if that's a long-winded answer to you, but I think the other option is allowing, and I think they do, those events can apply for dollars through the special events committee on those. So that we can tell them this is what's going to cost. They only have half of that. Maybe they apply for that money for the special events.
Okay, and so there's no fees specific to those events that are noted as going up.
Okay. Well, so we bill the actual cost, no profit, the actual cost for police services. I believe the fire department does the same thing if they're required public works. So they would go up based on labor.
Okay.
Right. So if whatever the contract is going to go up 3.5% next year, the cost for a police officer salary go up 3.5% compared to that same officer working today.
Yeah, and that's just different than a fee for service.
Right.
Yes.
And just to clarify too on so when it says NA, it's not that just means that you're not recommending any change, right? Not that we're not recommending it.
So
we're not recommending a change. Okay.
So many years ago, there was a flat fee. And every couple of years they would raise it $5. So it was $45, $55. Well, at about 2019, that fee was not keeping up anywhere close to the cost. We were losing, the city was losing, or subsidizing, depending on the view, a lot of money for every event. And even the ones that we were getting reimbursed, like Vibrant, for example, they reimbursed us. But we were only billing them $60 and off of making it. Maybe sometimes I think it was a lieutenant and saying, man, maybe $20 now on board. So just to also clarify a little bit, I know this is in the weeds, but I just want you to understand this. 25 years ago when I started, the individuals hiring police officers would pay the officers directly in cash, or maybe a check at the end of the event. That ended starting in East Moline about 15 years ago when an officer was injured at an event. And there was an argument between the city and the private event about workers' comp. So every police officer that is working an event are on duty. They come to work, they go on duty, and they are covered by the city for liability, indemnification, and workers' comp. They get hurt, it's on us. That officer is protected, but we bill them for the hourly rate that we're expending. So it's really, we're subsidizing that as well, because we're not going to bill them on workers' comp, the liability, the payout, or any of that stuff that they get. So we're still subsidizing in addition. It's expensive to staff it.
I have one.
Yes.
What is the false alarm? I accidentally dialed 911 before and they
No.
came to the house. Is that or
No, this is for commercial burglary.
Okay.
There's no alarm behind that. There is
There are no more questions on police, we will go to fire. So for fire, we had 22 total fees. We're recommending an increase for 8 of them for elimination. 5 are EMS fees, and there are 3 other fire fees that we will be talking about tonight. The total revenue impact for this department is $702,375. $700,000 coming from EMS, and the additional $2,375 for the remaining fees. In your fee packet, this would start on page 11 through 13 would be EMS fees, and the remaining increased fees on page 18. So to touch on EMS fees, which will be the largest revenue impact you will see tonight, that $700,000, which is a roughly 20% increase, and I've used all of this will be broken down on page 13. We've included an ambulance review revenue summary. This is considered a modest conservative estimate as call volume has risen in the past few years, although anything can happen. And then this is considered very important because we're looking at cost recovery. Currently, we are only covering 54% of our AMS fees per call. If we raise these fees, we will be covering up to 82% with no greater burden on our residents. And this is quite important, and I will talk about in a minute because of House Bill 2785 that is going into effect on January 1st. Looking at our paramedics, these primarily the recipients are Medicaid, and we are covered with reimbursement through the GEMT program through the state. And then the rationale for this increase is that this keeps our fees aligned with ongoing reporting standards for under GEMT, and the upcoming bill that goes into effect. These remain reimbursable through GEMT for any Medicaid recipients, as well as it recovers closer to the actual cost of service without increasing burden on our residents, because this will go to the insurance companies more than it will affect our residents. Deputy Chief Sotos has partnered with EMS to figure out most of this and do a lot of the work on that. And is here to answer any questions from myself on that, and then Fire Marshal is here to answer any questions on these years.
Wait, Ms. Kastner?
I guess, am I too early to ask questions or?
No, because I want to.
I actually like one or two questions. So the recommendation to eliminate the fees for the non-resident. So is that for folks who are just like visiting and something happens, or those like if we go like out of the city of Moline and have to give service to somebody out of the city?
A little bit of both. So we actually have the current ordinance is two-part fee schedule. So residents are charged less than non-residents. So if we go to the vibrant, pick up somebody, somebody in a car accident, or yes, if we go to another municipality, then we would charge them at that higher rate as a non-resident.
So why would we eliminate these on our non-residents? I mean, I'm just a question. So why would we eliminate them for our non-residents and then increase them for our residents? My only question is that I actually had one of my neighbors reach out because they had received about a $1,900 bill for emergency services. They have all their cuts to Medicaid. They have lost their Medicaid. They were uninsured. So that, I mean, they're unable to pay that.
That
So-
was my question, was what about the uninsured? You
Because I
said
mean,
that you can recover it through the state program with going to insurance companies, but how many people don't have insurance?
So when we look at our pyramids, we're about 55% Medicaid, 18% Medicare. So those people are non-exempt. Then we have the additional 27%. Of that, 9% we consider self-pay. Of that 9%, a good portion of that would end up going to a third party, like for a more vehicle accident. Or they had insurance, but they didn't have proof of it at the time they received service at the hospital. So there are going to be a small percentage of people that will get that bill for that $1,449 because of that.
So you're
So
saying.
what we're
it's
trying to do
single digits of percentage of the population here that
Yeah.
affects. I'm just
Yeah, no, but I guess I just, I know that Medicaid, people are falling off Medicaid, they're changing the requirements, there's work requirements, people are falling off once they don't see that, so I guess I was concerned about those fees, and if there was a way that we could somehow work with it. I think the one that I ended up talking to, we referred for level of assistance, I'm not sure if that actually happened or not, but just having some kind of program to help those who are uninsured.
that and other KJ programs might be, like you said, but I hear what you're saying. I don't know what else the other council members think. Why would we eliminate? Is it too hard to track down non-residents to get it paid?
No, I think it's just to simplify it, and that was one of the things that in the meeting with Barry and Bob that was talked about and decided to pursue it that way. So everybody be paying the same amount, whether you're a resident or non-resident, and that $1,449 per ALS call.
Oh, so it's not that we would-
$1,231 for a BLS call.
Got it. So the way I was looking at it was that there's a current fee, and then we would just take the fee.
So we're just taking away the non.
Got it. Okay, thank you for
Everybody's
clarifying.
gonna be paying the same amount for the same service.
Oh, that's just not how.
Yeah, thank you.
I guess I read it that way, but I'm still wondering why. Is it an administrative simplicity? Like, because if we're going to subsidize someone, I want to subsidize residents for that.
Yeah, and that's obviously, that's something we can still keep in the ordinance. So the reason we came up with this number, the 1449 for an ALS and 1231 for a BLS, is because we submit, we joined the GMT program several years ago. And so we have to justify the cost of what we do. So we submit an application every year. It covers ambulance personnel salaries, my salary, the building amortization, vehicle amortization, all that kind of stuff goes into a formula that we submit to the state. And they give us a number that says, this is what, it's not covering our total cost, because that's $1,700. But they're coming up with a number that says, this is what we are going to subsidize you guys. Because in the past, what would happen is we would bill them under the old fee schedule resident ALS wall, $963. We bill Medicaid that, and they would send us $340. So GMT is supposed to help cover that gap because they're having ambulance services that are failing because, again, majority of the patients are Medicaid, and they're not recouping the cost of the actual cost of running that ambulance service. So what they do is they subsidize it. They give us, even right now, we bill them for a resident $963 for an ALS call. They send us $1,449. Then the way that works with the state is, state of Illinois has said that the money we receive from GMT, we give them 50%. So anything we get from GMT, the state gets 50%.
So you're saying this is an easier way to calculate what you have to do for the state?
You could, if you guys, we were told to take that out. That's why we're presenting it without the resident versus non-resident.
Told by whom?
Wow.
My personal experience is very different. Unfortunately, once I got unconscious in the middle of the night, and my 17-year son called ambulance. After I got the bill, I told him, I have good insurance. I was billed $1,100 or $1,050. I'm thankful to them. They agreed to take it in the installment.
Yeah, so this is where Ron was talking about with the new bill that's in state law, it takes effect January 1st, 2027. We can no longer, what happened is your insurance says we'll cover this much, then we would bill the patient the balance. So with this new act in Illinois, we can no longer bill the patient that the difference. So by bringing our rates up higher, the insurance companies then have to look at what our rates are, and then we have to send them to the state, and then it will be decided what our rate is. The insurance companies have to pay, and that's what we would get.
To build on that as well, because it's pushing to the insurance companies, it is also continuing to protect our residents as well when this bill goes into effect, because the state is in subsection B15. We're all the way through it. Subsection B15 also protects residents that they cannot be overcharged by an insurance company for what we are considered as a home rule out of network service provider. So they are, I know it's a lot of fun words, they are required to basically kind of meet us halfway. The resident has to pay up to their deductible or whatever their plan outlines, and then the insurance is taking the brunt if we do not lose out on that. And then looking to kind of go back to that, for those who cannot pay, the 9% of our average calls is we increase this again, roughly 550, if that, depending on the year between calls. So that would be the number you're looking at those impacted by our increase. But on average, we are taking about 6,000 calls a year. So that is a smaller portion of that are actually being affected. But across the board, this bill is protecting poor people and is protecting us if we want to increase rates.
So you said the state takes half of what we're receiving on those payments, and those payments still aren't meeting our costs, or is it after the state takes their half?
I would say after the state takes their half. Oh no, I take that back. No, I would say we're still not getting the $1,700 that we. That's what the cost is for every ambulance. So they're subsidizing it. They give us the 14%. And we get that.
So we're still hemorrhaging.
But it's just helped out a lot. I think we were at around $700,000 we received last year after we give the money to the state, get back.
And I think it's important to call out too that my problems with this are not how we are building our fee structure, because we have to remain solvent. My problem with this is that we have a stupid healthcare system in this country. And that we're forced to push this back, because we are, like, there is no doubt, we are punishing the most vulnerable citizens of our country. And I appreciate though that we have other methods of going back to that, but I also think it's very important to call out that it's not the fault of finance or of the fire department, that is what we have.
I was gonna just exactly say what Mr. Schmidt said, is that, yeah, I mean, the 500 doesn't seem like it's flat, though there's like are going to be impacted, and there are ones that don't have it, so. Completely agree with that, it's just, I was wondering though, you said that you read the whole bill, was there anything in there regarding uninsured people at all?
Yes, as far as I just add to on that 90%. Ultimately, we do have some programs that it, but the bottom line is it eventually goes to elections, and ultimately it may take some time and it may get their credit a little bit, but ultimately we would right now. City would be the one that right now.
circling that to the resident versus non-resident, do we know what other area departments are doing? As far as like what, or the cities, I suppose.
Yeah, I believe Rock Island, reading their ordinance, looks like they have differentiation between resident versus non-resident. Or they do not. They're being provided by and looking at, I had our secretary get a hold of one of her colleagues that she's in a group with, and they sent us their rates, and a lot of those were not resident versus non. I'd say majority of them were not resident versus non. But again, a lot of those are much complicated. So.
My little anecdote here, and I appreciate all this. I think it's great. We obviously need to do it to help with the bottom line. So one time I've ridden in an ambulance in the last couple of years, my insurance company who was billed said, well, this is your part of your deductible. And so you're paying the full amount. And so the talking points, that we need to be ready for. I think people that regularly need assistance, obviously it's a different scenario than someone who needs it once a year or once every 10 years. They're paying out of pocket for these rights because of our crappy healthcare system that has a high demand.
Yeah, the insurance companies will still charge a copay.
To go back to the non-resident thing, something that will kind of shift that with this bill coming out is that we are an out-of-network provider. We don't contract with insurance companies. So even if we are charging this rate to someone that is from out of town, they are still protected under this bill, regardless of whether or not we charge them more for being out of network or in it. So at that point, it makes it consistent for insurance companies to charging it rather than charging them two different, but they are still protected under this bill, whether or not we charge the same rent.
So I'm not quite sure I think I'm hearing the council understands what you presented. Feels to me like the jury may still be a tiny bit out on this, if you're going to pay the same.
I think I can address that a little bit also because with the GEMT, HFS, the services, they can review what our fees are. So like if we are not charging what they're giving us for Medicaid, they can say, well, you guys can do it. They can lower our GMT reimbursement. I don't know that will happen, but from everything I'm told, it's a possibility they could do. So what I would recommend to not have, or to keep the resident versus non-resident, I think you could raise the non-resident up to those levels, 1449 and 1231, and then have a $200 discount offer for a resident, whatever it is that whatever you guys decide. Part of this thing too that I would recommend too is as the GMT rates increase, our ordinance aligns with that, which a lot of municipalities are doing that as well. It's built in there that we will charge what the GMT rate is. Residents would then pay $300 plus. Yes, it's definitely possible.
Would you have a breakdown of how much these are, like how much we collect each year compared for residents and non-residents, or like what the difference in calls are, or what the dollar amount is?
Majority are resident. Our billing company did not have the time to do that. It's majority resident.
So what is our next time that we'll look at this particular issue? Is it September or October? September. Okay. So we'll have another chance to understand more.
And I appreciate you wanting to set the rate in the ordinance to mirror whatever the current rate is. That removes politics from this conversation, and I think it's really a good forward-thinking approach. And I guess the question is for non-resident, is it a flat fee or is it a percentage that we go over? And that's, I guess, something we can discuss in the future.
Please continue.
Are there any questions on the other remaining? Those can be found in the key.
Go ahead.
All right, the next department we have is finance.
Our total fee we have is 14 fees with a recommended increase for 2 of them. It's very small impact coming from our department. It's $448. Our 2 fees we are recommending increase is outdoor carnivals, which we do on services. We have the top of one at South Park, and then secondhand dealer licenses, which is essentially a thrift store license. And both of these we are recommending increase for are just to keep pace with cost of wages, and because these are people to be collaborating with outside departments, so there are other wage factors in those. Those are on page 24. Yep.
Although the carnival was 175 plus 50 per day. This is a flat 250 then, or what?
The 250 is the application fee, and then pays the $50
Just
per
right
day
there.
that they operate.
So. Okay, but I'm having trouble with that.
Yes.
Second hand dealer is a pawn shop, or what's the difference between that? Thrift store. Third, under store. Yeah. All right, we have the clerk, and we have 3 total fees for them. Like 1 recommended increase for tobacco. They have 3 classes of licenses that they are recommending increase more. That would be class A to 175, class B and C to $150. And then their total department revenue impact, if we decide to increase, would be $2,775. Something to note when we look at that fee sheet is the chunks that we have from surrounding municipalities. We are either in line and or behind other department cities. That is something to keep in mind as we consider raising that fee. Want to put that at that recommended. Council.
Cool.
Thank you. The next department is Public Works. We have a total of 7 fees, recommended increase for 1 of their fees, and a recommendation for a new fee that they have. Their total revenue impact, if we went forward, both of these would be $11,110. They are on page 45. This would be the both ways pickup and back fees.
Is there a plan go back, please, especially since it's new?
People backs are basically. That corresponds 20 to 67. So we're still trying to.
I didn't even know you could do that.
Well, because we provide good service.
What about the difference between the garbage from the list and one that was put out?
So we're actually technology to take
So if I call it an argue, you can just pull it off and say it's correct by your street.
Alright, so our next department after that is, we have lawn engineering, but they have no accommodation. They did not have any recommended increases for any of theirs. So we are gonna go to CED specifically within planning. They have a total of 25 fees, which are all nicely consolidated on 1 page for you, so you don't have to go through them. They have no recommended increases for their fees, but they do have 4 new fees, for flood development that they have requested. On there, and then it is a total revenue impact of $3,900 roughly, given the amount of permits and applications that will be applied for.
What's the difference between PUD preliminary plan and PUD outline development plan?
The outline is kind of like a sketch idea that you might have that you just want to see what the planning commission thinks about it before you do much work. You kind of come in with just a sketch idea or something.
And so if someone wanted that now, they would just get it assessed at a higher fee.
We don't charge a fee for it right now, so it's just something we discovered that we don't get it happening very often either, but we did.
I was wondering, I know you've had preliminary conversations about short-term rental,
Yes.
rules. Or capturing, you know, moving away from just an honor system to an actual, like, everyone will pay.
Yeah.
I don't know if the council's aware, but we've been in a little conversation about it. I think you may have done some work on it as well, Barry, and grossly under reporting, I think. So I'm wondering, was there any idea or thought given to a short-term rental fee or license of any sort that could become a guaranteed small revenue stream? I mean, we have, what was it, 40? About 40 short-term rentals that we know of. Some of them, like one just off the block for me, is absolutely a home that people could be living in, family could be living in, was living in before these people took it over. So I don't have anything against people wanting to earn an income from a short-term rental, but if you're going to take that off of our goals for affordable living, then I feel that people should be paying. So I don't know if you've thought about this yet, or if the council has thought.
So Bill and I might disagree, so I think this process is a little bit ahead of us on short-term rentals, but the easiest thing for us to do would be to have just $1,000 short-term rental fee. Have it be one of our rental units that we inspect. Forget about the hotel motel tax, because it's not really being collected basically anyway. And if you get caught, maybe have a forgivable year, but next year if you get caught not reporting it, then do a double fee, so it get $2,000 fee for somebody who tries to sleep around. So that's the easiest thing for us to do. It may not be the most refined.
Yeah.
But that'd be the easiest thing for us.
So do you think we could see that reflected in the budget by October?
Yes, I think we probably could.
I think that would be a smart way to start
Yeah,
2027.
we discussed a couple of different ideas. Anything beyond the application fee that was just raised, we get into enforcement issues about exactly how well we would be able to enforce it. The application, I think we have a lot better chance of getting close to, or never gonna have 100%, but getting closer to 100% enforcement with that fee as opposed to structuring it.
And then would we be assured that there is a to following up on a periodic basis, like let's know about and bringing people in line?
Well, so we know about, that would mean they're gonna be inspected and
Yeah.
get graded. Then yes, we'd be searching so right now, we either get complaints or we notice things, my staff will notice things and say, that looks like it might be a rental. So then we might find something that way too, or you can go through the Airbnb site and just search and see what you find. So that's one thing Bill and I talked about. It's like, once you go to that website, they're kind of self-reporting.
Well, I guess what I'm saying is if you're gonna institute a fee, that's checked on a yearly basis, it seems like we should also note how it's gonna be administered within the organization, right? What's the periodic follow-up? Is it every 6 months
Sure.
staff is gonna do it? I feel like maybe it has to be in writing to make sure we're actually doing
And the way I was thinking, and I haven't thought about it all the way yet, but I was thinking it would be like all of our other rental units, but there might be a reason to say we can follow up with this area than we would others.
it. Okay. Other thoughts, Castro, and Anthony?
I was just gonna ask or comment, is there, just to make this, there's gonna be a differentiation between like a short-term rental that is at like 30 days compared to
Yes.
one that is, maybe they're, renting it out of the weekend or something. 'Cause I know that sometimes they'll list a certain number of days so that they're not considered,
Now,
rental.
we define a vacation rental unit as less than 28 days of thing, right? So you're basically either a rental unit, go longer than a month, or you're less than a month if you fall into this vacation rental list. So we'd be changing that exemption, charging the fee, inspecting it like we do all of our other units. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
So, I would say we should be searching VRBO, Airbnb, everything ourselves periodically, just to create a list. It's gonna be a boring 4 hours a month or 4 hours every 6 months, but I think that's the most surefire way. Unless, Bill, we're not the only city that wants to do this. Are Airbnb and VRBO, do they work with municipalities to give lists? Is there precedent for this?
Not that I'm aware of. Actually, when Chris brought this up to me, I had
about zero knowledge of this particular type of regulation. We can certainly look into cooperation, but I can tell you that my experience, the more that a company functions on the internet, the less that they cooperate with law enforcement.
Just to be clear, short-term rental ordinances are being done everywhere.
Yeah,
That
they
part,
are.
but you're
I
talking
was
about
unaware of it, but they are. That is something that's knowledge on my mind. But with companies that engage in internet advertising, that's an area where you typically don't get a lot of cooperation. When you're dealing with internet usage, there is a lot of protection of privacy from government. They don't usually protect the privacy of their consumers from other corporations. They sell their data to anyone who will buy it, but they do try to protect themselves because, well, that's what they do. I can't explain it any better than just that's the way that it typically functions.
Okay.
Airbnb does have a city portal, so I think that they've been forced to comply, and so I think, David, we might want to spend a little time. They might have APIs that we could just ping into, I'm sure the other ones too. I mean, so there might be existing solutions.
Yes.
Chris, has there been more discussion with the planning commission of changing like the same? Because the reason I ask is the zoning fees are very high, especially if you compare it to other municipalities. But completely understanding what we heard from the planning commission, like it's hundreds and hundreds of dollars to like put a notice in the paper. If there's a way that we can work towards cutting that out and like meeting more like where Bettendorf is at with their fees with zoning, that would make us so much more development friendly if we could just like take an easy win. So if there's any wiggle room around that, like that's definitely a direction I would take with the zoning is if we can get a change noticing requirement, this would be a lot cheaper and a lot more enticing to good ideas. If someone has a variance they want to like pursue and just get an answer to see if they can stay there all night, I think we should charge them hundreds of dollars just to ask them much money.
And Alan brings up a good point because, you look at what other cities charge, like you can see why I would not want to go. These are the same fees we've been charging probably for 15 years. So you can see why I would not want to go higher with these. And it's another great point is that newspaper notice is one of the biggest costs, right? Other than the salary of people. So we really try to not have more barriers to be able to do these things. And I think if we were able to remove the newspaper cost, it would save us.
Continue.
Today with CED, we are going to go on to building. They do a massive total of 55 fees for with schedule changes. And one note I would like to say that looking at it now, there's one unhighlighted that's above page 65. So include page 62 through 64 in that. We have one recommended decrease and 4 new fees. Those decreases and 4 new fees are coming from the license estimate variation, which Alex has kindly provided a thorough explanation following from this. It's about the impact of her revenue on her licenses and the impact of her new fees and why she is recommending them.
The great thing that Drake and Alex came up with, that $50 land review fee, should have been a lot of folks that want to come up and get their whole business designed by her, right? So it takes an hour of time to explain everything, and then they kind of go away. That fee is refundable if they end up applying. Right, so they'll get that, the education for her to come out and find out all those codes, and if they end up really going and getting their license, then 50 to not be charged again. So I thought that was a great solution.
Okay, all right. And then finally, we have utilities. They have a total of 20 fees with a recommendation of 3 increases, 2 eliminations, and 3 structure changes. Their total department revenue impact will be $22,028, starting on page 91, and your primary focus being pages 93 through 98 and 105. You're looking at a combination of fee structure changes for the turn off and on fees, turn on payment increases for water main tap, and an elimination of large cap fees or an increase, which generates their strong as well.
That's.
So similar to like the ambulance discussion, that large diameter eliminate fee, it's just that it costs a small diameter fee.
Yeah, so we are requesting elimination because if we're lucky, we get one request a year to exactly. So it's-
Anything further?
I just have to. Notices, the room notices.
Sure.
We are hoping that council will be pleased with the program. Until next time.
But many of you recall, I came to you in, well, just prior to January 2024, I think it was December, to talk to you about our transition a month ago. Made a lot of changes since we did that. All of those are very customer centric. And so, a lot of this came from council at your request. We brought in, the mailing and the printing of the water utility bills into Illinois, so we can get those to our customers faster. We also extended the period of time, that cushion that we gave them, because USPS does take a little bit longer. It used to be we just gave them 3 days before their penalties on, now we give them 7. The other thing that we did was really create that new customer portal that allows them to get paperless bills. We have 45% or so that participate in paperless billing. One of the things we talked about too at that time is we were at 11% auto pay. Our goal was to get to at least what the value is at, which was the highest in the area of 40. We're over 40. So we've been thrilled with the enrollment in those, the paperless billing and the auto pay, really trying to give everything to our customers that they need so that they don't get these late penalties. So having done that, we're to the point now where what we'd like to do is start mailing out a past due notice, much like what American Energy does with the cell phone carrier. They'll get that notice rather than us posting that blue notice and charging $25 at their property. There is some cost to mailing that out, and there's some lost cost from not having the posting. So we're considering all of that when we come to this decision to come to you and say, let's match what our surrounding municipalities are doing. Instead of just charging 5% on water and sewer charges every month for those that are late, let's go and do 10%. I don't know why we didn't do that on the stormwater and the trash, because if they weren't paying for that, they really should have done it. So this is kind of just bringing it to the point that makes sense in what the surrounding municipalities do. We're not proposing being like Crystal Lake and charging 20%, but we think 10% is reasonable.
The thing is, we need no more notices.
Yeah, and what that does too, it allows our meter crew to start focusing on replacement of those aging meters. And when we get more accurate readings from these new meters, that is, so we really need to start focusing on this.
I like the transition to these software social tools. Of course, we're still gonna have to shut water off, but it happened very quickly, as I found out when my credit card didn't transfer my meter system. But I know we had a lot of system problems, but as we go through it, do we know for sure if there's an expectation that those are more effective or less effective?
We don't know. We know that a lot of the municipalities don't post to the doors. One of the ones that Rock Island, we didn't use them as a comp back in 2024 because they weren't. They're now moving to monthly billing, but they were doing 5% of the total bill, but they were also posting a notice on the door that they were using a third party to do that, and they were charging 35 versus our 25. So I think this is, you're right, a softer approach. We don't know if it's going to be as effective, but again, we always try to think of what can we do that's more customer centric, and I think this is really good service to set that up.
I guess I would just ask, as we correct, that we track that a little and follow, because if we suddenly see like, oh, yes, it's working to an extent, but because we took the flu notice out, now we're getting way more late. Because obviously the flu notice comes as a pretty, going to take care of it. So that's my only concern, is that it's kind of maxed out. Some people that, and $25 is a lot better than I love, because the letter wasn't stirred enough. I'd be curious if we start to see that.
We do want to see what that impact's gonna be, so we're suggesting a 3-month transition period where we're sending out the notice and we're continuing to post as well. And then we'll see if we're seeing those getting paid and reducing the number of new notices that we're having to print. And then hopefully, we're seeing a reduction in the number of water shut-offs.
And when do you think this is gonna happen?
Well, it depends on you. We'd like to start that. I'd like to bring an ordinance back to you if that's
In
something. you'd like to
September or
see.
late August?
I'd like to do that.
Two things about this. One is the new meters are great because not only are they more efficient, but they can shut them off remotely without going in like at the street. And this is really important for multi-unit because some of them share the same water service. So if one person doesn't pay, both people's water are shut. And so at least that's what the tech told me the other day when he came to do a reading for me. You're looking at me, Janine, like I might be wrong.
I'm not sure that we're gonna be able to do that.
Well, that would be great if we could.
Yet,
Okay. For the future thought, as far as trying this out, I'm proposing an idea. We do this at work when we try new things. We do A/B tests, where maybe half the city gets flu notices and half don't. Is that something we could feasibly do and then compare? Or am I being too scientific about this? You know?
I also need to look at tests all the time.
Yeah.
When we were talking about a marketing functionality or a product functionality, I think it's appropriate behavior. I'm not sure I feel it is appropriate when we're talking about sharing. I do think we should test against, do we see that rate increasing? Now, of course, challenging economic times and other things can play into skewing that number, but of course, that as well, but I very much oppose to bringing it.
All right.
I would agree with that. We have, our city broken up into 3 zones. So we could do it for 1 zone, but we will see, higher number of new notices in certain zones. And so it would be kind of hard to gauge that.
Did randomize it, but anyway.
Well, which would be a technically feasible issue.
Let's go. Staff are making a recommendation.
Sure.
All right. Anything further on this item?
I don't think so. So we've got a couple of things to come back. We have time for a little further discussion in September. And thank you, Rowan.
Thank you.
And the directors.
Yes, thank you very much, Robbie, for everybody on this schedule.
I was just gonna think, Rowan, you did a great job.
So we'll move to item 7.3, the 2027 to 2029 Special Capital Improvement Plan. Oh, we're next to Dave.
Or both. We're gonna switch things.
Okay.
And we're gonna start out with the PowerPoint. Chris Dating, we're gonna.
All right. I was getting there. Hello, I'm Daniel Davies. I'm the Economic Development Program Assistant and former intern here. So thanks for bringing me on full time. Nice to meet most of you. For those of you I hadn't, good to see you again. So to start off that special capital improvements fund and projects, we obviously know that the riverfront is going to be a pretty big core component of that. So this is kind of just to go through some of the riverfront financials that we're expecting, analysis, and then some of our recommendations to ensure the project functions in the way that was promised by the adopted plan. So to start off, just kind of talking about how this aligns with strategic goals and to the level that it does. So the riverfront and center plan itself directly and indirectly impacts strategic goals across all 4 pillars outlaid in the strategic plan. There are 17 unique goals that I identified here.
could be more. But it does deliver renewed infrastructure and streets, adding over 250 housing units to downtown, creates new retail and commercial opportunities, and then creating that one-of-a-kind civic amenity in the new amphitheater. There really isn't another project in the city of Moline that really tackles the strategic plan quite like the Riverfront does. So, where we are in that process, currently, we've invested over $5 million to date, and the restructuring the design team really reduces our initial schematic design costs by 50% and shrinks our schedule by a year. So that's something we're really excited about. Some of the things we've done so far include that acquisition of Bridgepoint and the remnant I-74 parcels, the procurement of new contractors and subcontractors, and then the creation of the master plan that you guys adopted last July. But even with all that current investment, our current funding levels are still too low to apply for grant opportunities and really start leveraging the dollars that we do have. And really increasing our funding for the Riverfront is going to put the city in a position that allows us to better leverage our dollars in a really meaningful way through both public and private investment. So some of the things that have been done so far include those like ESA phase 1s and 2s, our geotechnical reviews, site surveys, and more. And although those aren't necessarily physical improvements, they do establish a really good and informed method for moving forward with this project and check a lot of boxes for us in the city, our different grant reviewing bodies, and private developers. So to reach a position that really allows us to take advantage of different grant opportunities, talk with private investors, more dollars are needed, but thankfully we do have options to really get us there to move this project forward in a meaningful direction. So starting with that, going back to Bill Moline, as we talked about earlier in the night, really create those new infill development projects. And with this team, we really are a big fan of the subordinate mortgages program and that $500,000 funding limit. So you can see on that right, that's an excerpt from, I think it was Exhibit F in your guys' Renew Moline report that kind of walks through and visualizes how that program exactly functions. But really viewing the city as a lender in that subordinate position and procuring home building partners to deliver projects efficiently. So, and with that, it's also providing an additional $1.5 million in riverfront funding while still delivering new homes in the city if we fund at that $500,000 level. So you can see there as we walk through the example, $180,000 home price filtering down to $50,000 subordinate mortgage. Gives us, and then home builder equity of $9,000 reduces the loan to value that the bank is required to pay to under 70%, which is something that we really like to see, and the banks really like to see. It de-risks a lot for them, provides the resident the interest rate, and also just allows that.
So we're not trying to mess with you. I'm just going to switch to the bigger.
Yes.
Chris,
Yeah.
real quick question. Does this exempt them from PMI?
Well, that's a good question. We have to test that.
Because like that would be a huge
The primary, we're trying to get to the sub 70 is what we're trying
Right.
to go for. So that would be,
I think
as long
PMI
as they
is
see,
Yeah.
as long as they see this as equity, I mean,
which it would be with the right term.
because we wouldn't.
So I heard in our previous conversation, downtown is ripe for multi-family stuff. Right? Like there were a couple of sites you said were downtown, but they would probably not be single family homes.
Right.
So then why are we using numbers that are single family home numbers that we've talked about in that 180 is like the cost that we were thinking of building something.
Are we using 180 here?
Yeah.
It was just because that's suggested in the official report, just using that as an example.
Right, but it's different building types. We're not gonna build single family downtown in the riverfront.
But the two most buildable lots
Oh, no,
are,
no, this isn't that.
Yeah.
So, no,
Did we not just start out by talking about the riverfront project
budget.
budget?
So we're talking about budget.
Yeah, this is discussion of the budget, right?
yeah.
So,
That's
here's,
$500,000.
can I level
Am I
set?
crazy?
Can I level set for 1 second?
I think you're jumping to a conclusion, but could you back up and put some training wheels on about how we're bringing money to the riverfront by spending money somewhere else?
Yes, something didn't.
We currently have $2 million allocated towards home buyer infill program. We talked about the housing fund that we have $2 million sitting there relative to that.
$1 million per year, and then 500 $5 million. So the adopted budget was $1 million.
Okay.
Okay, so 26, we have $1 million.
Over the 3-year period of a budget is 2 million.
So this says $500,000 for the loan program, 1.5 for riverfront.
Yes. So it's reallocation of $2 million.
My apologies. Taking it to, bringing it to 500,000, freeing up an additional 1.5 million.
Thank, cause yeah, somehow I was like, how is that?
So, I can see this far. That's too much. Okay, here we go.
Chris, bottom right, there's a slider there. Don't use the slider, you use the plus minus.
Oh.
To zoom in and out without shooting. There you go.
So this is, now we're just jumping into the example of this. New construction house. So 180,000 in yellow, we can have fun with this, we can play with it. We can change the cost of the house. I'll walk through it, but we're just keeping it 180 right now. If we have a $50,000 secured mortgage, and play with this number however we want to. And just asking the home buyer to put down 5%, and we can change that to 10%. You can see how things change and requirements, but this 5%, that's something that's $1,000 down for the home buyer. Again, maybe utilizing other programs, assistance to get to that number, adding them 50,000. So what the buyer through the program brings to the table to the bank helps that position close. It's a sub 70% on the primary mortgage. Looking at this program, we did it for 10 years. By the way, we're doubling down on the sales concept.
Sounds like it.
But this gives you the flavor of how we can approach your adjustments to one, the value that it can be, and how we can use it. So looking at a 10-year program, 0% interest. So it'd be a 0% interest loan that we're making. We are talking with banks, having lending institutions, credit unions, highly recommend that there's some level of prepayment on the principal. Mainly because supplemental mortgage doesn't get forgotten about. And it's out of sight, out of mind. Someone goes to sell a house, and then all of a sudden the second mortgage pops up at the retirement company. It causes great issue. So they went to Steve Live. So something that people are paying on. And it's also a form of building equity. So again, this is if we it's fun. We can then do a couple things. What level of forgiveness does the city want? 0%. So it's a live supported mortgage that has to fully get paid back over time. We could leave 50% in as a forgiveness of 75%. And we can play with what that looks like as we establish the program. But what it does is, the concept is if it's a 10-year term year, 0 through 6, there's no level of forgiveness. It's always a live supported mortgage. So someone, and part of that is that 4, 0, 5, or 6, but there's always a good concept of an anti-flip. So if it was just 2 years, people just wait it out and flip it. If it's a tool that doesn't go long enough. So 0 to 6 will stabilize this and thus keeps it from being an anti-flipping tool. Over that period of time, at a 50% forgiveness level, they would pay $2,500 a year, $15,000 for the big pay on the principal. So that's part of the equity that would be in their house too. Then we could take the balance of we're going to forgive 50%. That means $25,000, and then year 7, 8, 9, and 10 it's pro rata forgiveness of 25% of the amount the total amount we're going to forgive each year. So the base stayed there 10 years. The forgiveness can our target of 25,000, 50% forgiveness is realized at year 10. So anytime they leave before that, it's just adjusted. You can see over here after their continued payment into it each year, and whatever year if they're going to leave this correctly paid back, this would be the balance out there on that. So at the end of the day, we have forgiven the 25,000 in this example, but we've also recouped the value of that person being a homeowner in the city of Moline, because as we talked about in the local program, economic impact and property taxes.
Well, yeah, I was gonna say, you have to build $3,600 times divided into 25K, then all it would be the same for forgiving. That
Yeah,
every year.
so this is saying it was 50,000, this is 50,000 square.
So if we forgive 25,000 and you want to make that up for the city's bottom line, you have, and they're contributing, those that move into those homes and get that forgiveness, they are contributing 3,600 a year in taxes and whatever. So it's 8 to 9 houses ever.
Because it would just be on the purchase. So they would have to be a resident for set, so this isn't, technically, this wouldn't force someone to make it. Like, it's not an entirely new home.
So
It
this
is.
concept, this support and mortgage program is a product for new construction. So this is that concept we partner with the home builder.
Yeah.
This is a specific
It's for new.
program. that we're-
That's what I'm saying. That's my only concern is I can accept some not recouping the investment, but if we're gonna do it, can't lose all of it. If we're saying we're increasing, you know what I'm saying? But the impact of of these existing means you'd have to have 8 of them a year at least to have the impact on our bottom line not be 0 because of the forgiveness. Does anyone understand me?
No,
I'm doing math like this way.
it's, no, because it's years. We are forgiving $25,000 over 10 years.
Oh, okay.
3,500 gets us over 25,000 after year 7.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
So
Me-
technically, the 0 through 6 forgiveness doesn't cover, but we fall short by
Okay.
1 year, and that will probably work out.
Okay, thank you for that. You know me long enough. You know what I was saying.
And just as a comparison, when we build Moline and build neighborhoods, everything increases. We don't care about return on investment on roads because we understand they're economic drivers. They bring people to jobs, they bring deliveries. So the benefit outweighs, in theory, that's the theory anyway. And I think that building homes is the same concept.
I was just concerned we weren't gonna. Before we were gonna be like, not able to keep up or.
So that fund wouldn't become self-sustaining.
No.
Because that $3,500 would not be allocated here, it would be spent away in other places. So I mean, this
Yeah.
does become a fund over time with donations.
Yeah, but the overall economic impact, if it's a winner, then we can look to continue to fund right on that. And that's subsequent, yes.
And just to be clear, because they'll already repackaged what's happening when I first got confused. The start of this restatement, you're really saying we should take out of the 2 million, keep 500K, but invest 1.5 into.
Yes, that's the.
Just in case anyone else needed that said that way.
I think we're getting there. We're getting there.
Just for a point, I would still like us to explore building some units from that 2 million. As we discussed, at the very minimum, as a pilot to figure out what's doable and what's repeatable so that we could do a multi-pronged approach. And I know that might take away $400,000 from the 1.5. But that's just,
And here's that, just to add. As said earlier, we have this alternate construction period leverage. We took that same 50,000. Provide that as a city construction. Or with the builder, as they take down their finance, right? They're gonna take down a construction loan, they're not gonna take down 100% of the sales price, it's less than good. Profit built into it. So they're going to be less, but we still bring that same 50,000 or bring that builder in a attractive position for the primary lender. The main goal is that the person in that construction house is, so even though it's self-facilitated, this is for the adoption of the builder to then, because they're also going to be partnering with the MSP program. This support already exists, they have to travel through this first round, doesn't have to at all. Either way, they're going to be marketing home with us. And that's just the other piece of it too, is that the builder, the home builder, if we have a as you're talking about it, to create a relationship with their extension.
Right.
They are truly the city's home building partners. The city builds themselves, or we bring a builder inside through selection process and to help us complete this program. So that's that. It's not it's just the leverage. It's $1,500. It's a risk. You know, it's also we don't choose self fund. Back to the bank and loan for construction.
And then it's collections and billing and everything.
So this is just how it could exist. It could recycle again. It just really goes from a permit to a construction approach. We got a full amortization table with this. So anyone that wants to compare this, just have a blast. So I'll stop it. That's just more. Hopefully that was. And that's bigger, at least bigger than that.
And to move on to our next slide, as much as we would like for that $1.5 million reallocated from the original two of Bill Moline to fully fund the infrastructure river fund, that unfortunately will not get us there. So to fund that process, we are recommending the issuance of a GO bond in the amount of $10 million for the initial infrastructure and design engineering. This really does ensure that the project can move forward as planned, gives us the necessary things, and also provides us a lot of leverage and grant match opportunities, and moves us to a point where we can start to take it to the private market, talk with private developers about bringing additional dollars in. So I'll turn it back over to Chris to kind of walk through what this funds on a more specific level, year over year, both with seeing leverage grant dollars as part of that picture, and also just looking at it from a pure standpoint of what is a $10 million bond.
Yeah. So, in hard to read, I know, but here's the takeaway: the dark gray column, that's 2025. That is reflected upon the dollar. So I think it's pretty much before. Hopefully, take a moment to realize we spent over $5 million already for all the acquisitions that have made. So we have allocated significant dollars that are some costs and expenses. So we're into the riverfront. 2026, just as a quick guide, everything in blue is payable, is paid out of current funding is proposed. You'll see in the CIP, special CIP, we'll walk through the current funding 2026, 27, 28, in addition to attending. So if it's in blue, that means we already have the dollars in or proposed in the special CIP plus the $10 million in bond. So 2026, and we did this because it's also, you know, things are happening, but what do we? So 2026. So environmental science assessment phase 1, phase 2, geotechnical study survey. These things are done. We need to launch. This will be part of the upcoming resolutions for restructure for design services for the architectural A&E and for civil engineering at the schematic level. So it gets us floodplain design, the infrastructure assessment, the remnant plaza, the existing buildings of the tower. That's site schematic design for that, amphitheater schematic design, and then the planning as well. All those dollars in 2026 were have spent or designed to go, but also includes $2 million, which we have budgeted for demolition. So what that is, I think 26, it takes us to a point where demolition, advanced demolition, and we're starting to get some milestones, those things, tangible things. Then we're halfway through, well, we're all the way through a lot of critical assessments relative to the cleanness of our site, what it takes to remediate our site. We're de-risking this overall site for ourselves, but mainly for the private market as we speak. So that's what we've been doing in 26. So, and those have gone fantastic. In the big picture of how dirty that site could be, we're very encouraged by these two studies, I would say, as well as geotechnical. And we have a clarity on approach for writing the mitigation plan. But the demolition will be done, then we'll have floodplain design, the remnant plaza and the existing should be receiving the tower, parts warehouse on the north side, this whole old building that is inside of there, that through demolition, we're gonna unearth fantastic brick, structure, it's great. At the east end and the west end, the shipyard seating. So those buildings exist, they're there, there's interest, we already have a tenant, hydraulic, parts warehouse, 1,000 square feet, 14-foot high ceilings, 3 columns, fantastic space, restaurant, party in that, second floor to that, parts warehouse, shipping and receiving 5,000 square foot, 35 feet height, interior height, brick and factory glass structure. So these are highly leasable spaces. We're gonna hollow out the center of that as we do the design approach and create an interior plaza, surface market. So it's a very urban warehouse district version of the dining center. So it's very urban. It's a very strategic way and a very affordable way to repurpose existing buildings and create a finger pulse, big on the pulse and identity to the site. And the towers there. So it's also supporting surrounding that physically supporting that it's a complement to the tower. So those are things that are highly tangible, de-risk, demolition, and advanced investments.
The amphitheater design, I know I've mentioned a couple of you, when I met the new director of Vibrant, I said, you've got to talk to him, we have to bring him in on the design of it, because he mentioned in our introductory meeting, like, he's seen plenty of places to like build this thing, expecting artists to use it and and mark whatever companies associated with make it work, and it just doesn't work. And so then we have to plan with the people that would be running.
Yes.
So is that happening?
Oh, yeah, and you'll see if you go to the right, the amphitheater, as you go into DD and CD level, that's a grayed out box. And then you keep going to the right under 29, the amphitheater construction, I think it's a grayed out box. The amphitheater is a fantastic opportunity for us to work, especially with Rena and others. It is a very financeable, fundable, separate activity to not push off, but we can work with them. So.
You just jogged a memory. I had someone in the community reach out and tell me that an amphitheater, that there are a dozen empty amphitheaters in the Quad Cities. Why are we adding another? And so, do you have anything that you can give us to kind of respond to that, other than we're going to partner with X Vibrant, the arena, for booking? I mean, like, question mark. What is a good response to that, if that's within scope?
For sure.
I'd like to know which dozen there are, because I don't think there are.
Well, here's what it says. Absolutely subscribe to that. Is we can hit this completely and the bolder and harder it is I think that's what next year right here. So we in our design we keep leaning towards those natural, organic, site place based. So all the natural sites. So that's one of the themes throughout the play area equipment. It's natural based discovery. It doesn't have plastic equipment. It's more natural based discovery. More like a children's type area. Same thing with the amphitheater. A really good example is Fort Moline College at their amphitheater. So it's stone seat, it's grass. So it's a softer stage with all of the AV capabilities there. It's a much softer presence. The main thing is that the amphitheater iteration they're going in. So it should all be just a continuation of the park. So when it's not a concert, it's still green grass, it's more Ravinia, it's going along.
That part makes sense. I think one of the best takeaways from the NBA stuff we talked about PMT and what was helped with the Spiegel building originally was the feasibility study. So if the amphitheater doesn't have something like that done, we're probably missing something. Again, I don't want us to be in that boat. I do understand that make it useful in multiple ways so it never goes empty. Like we don't want a stage with nothing happening. It's permanent, like we see down the track. But The
Agreed,
feasibility study should be part of it.
but we want to do that with experts and partners.
Yeah. So that would be, according to this, it's like in the next year. Correct?
Yeah, so maybe we
This year,
we would
next
need to be active on that now. That's gonna inform the overall park design. That's the square footage and the occupancy and the attendance, with the level of attendance, which is gonna inform parking, so.
And this is always in the back of my head, so I want to throw it out while we're talking about this. How that impacts or plays off of Back Street Landing, this will also be an important part of that. Yes. It's
I'll stop that fight for that, yeah, it's right. So, 27, again, trying to give you a snapshot, like, what's the value proposition? What do we get for this? And so it's really two things. So it's more tangible, so we're identifying things, and knowing what stage we can get to with that level of investment, that's one thing. But also just, facing it head on, where we need additional for this. We have already invested in Riverfront, and right now we are basically on a path for 2026. We can get through 2026 in this work without additional funding. So this is where the general fund is. That's a start way to phrase it. I think that's the proper thing we should communicate. So we're really not slow for the design. But again, fantastic ways to advance in the efficiency of what we can get to. Good stewards of $10 million. But 27 say environmental cleanup, again, necessary. We need to continue to de-risk the project. Infrastructure, preliminary infrastructure to activate that Redmond Plaza. And then also the construction, finishing design and construction in the Redmond Plaza to make those leasable spaces again, bringing tenants. So as we work our way down 2027, they're also seeing at the bottom and we're triggering private development coming into the site as well. So just with that Redmond Plaza, just a little private investment law. Again, as we compare buildings and make them leasable, great, form gray shells. This is additional investment we can follow. And then I'll think floodplain protection is going to be a big part of our existence. And then 28 really takes it to, you start to see it takes it to the next level. The main thing being the infrastructure, the floor plan infrastructure construction, the whole one that gets us perimeter roads, gets us a fully accessible site, doesn't really get us tier, and then additional funding will go under, starts to open up this. What this also has, what's not in blue, are dollars identified that we've identified we're going to walk through grant opportunities. Don explained that, but this is where we also succeed in grant. So there's a lot that we can pursue, and we set 25% rate on grants. And some of them were very high confidence on, and then we're going to go through that. So this is conservative on what we can issue with grants, and we got to and this is sort of a longer conversation. Right?
Yeah.
Revolt.
No, I mean, even though it requires us looking into geo bonds, at least it's 10 million, not 20. Right? I mean, that makes me happy that this sounds more like, at this point, for this phases, more like what we did for the pool. If I remember this.
It was around 8, wasn't it?
Yeah. And we created a very short payoff period for that. So, what else would we do?
No, no, so just so the tables like using what's in gray, those dollar amounts those are not. So you can see a 10 million bond, it goes along with grants and other dollars already spent for $37 million. That's what impacts, but that is the level for the riverfront, the gateway, to attract the level of investment veracity. As a part of hotels, restaurants, parking garage structures to really realize the vision. So that leverage we put together kind of economic impact for that. As you can see, private development dollars there for the initial calculation.
grant opportunities that open up on that $10 million band. So like you're saying, it's not $20 million, but we're hoping it's 10 million that nets us 20. So what you see on the screen right now is 6 grants that we've identified. It's not an exhaustive list of every grant that could possibly be available for the riverfront, but they are some big ticket items that can definitely provide a substantial amount of funding. So what we've done with budgeting is take a conservative approach and look at about a 25% hit rate, success rate on that bond to get to a number of about $12 million in leverage grant proceeds that can come into the project. So got a map here so we can just kind of visualize where these dollars can go. And as we're looking at this, starting with kind of our higher confidence sources, that's going to be ITEP, and it's going to be a brownfield redevelopment loan. So ITEP, looking at infrastructure, streets, coming in there, just in the center of the site, looking at that, trails, boardwalks, streetscapes. So those trails to the north, it also funds a lot of additional site elements that accompany trails, boardwalks, and streetscapes. So that can be things like trail lighting, overlooks, viewing area, that promenade. So that's what we're looking at, as well as some related stormwater things. Don, is there anything on ITEP?
No. So it does not fund any roadways. So it's only for pedestrians or streetscaping items. But yeah, like David said, it does fund a lot of the extra things that I go along with it, with some grant programs.
Is this then replace, because a few weeks ago you asked us for ideas, this would be replacing any of those projects?
Yes.
So we didn't get the US EPA Brownfields grant that we applied for earlier this year. But in the debrief, they connected me with the Illinois EPA Brownfields person, and we've had a conversation with them, and there is some state funding that we can tap into, mainly a brownfields redevelopment loan, which is going to be 50% forgivable at 0% interest rate. So it's kind of like half grant, half loan at 0%. So that we feel this is, pretty much, we're going to be able to probably like 90% sure we're going to be able to get this money. So that's really encouraging for us, and a good, amount for us to clean up. So that is something we're working on currently, assuming, this special CIP budget moves forward.
Yeah, so that'll help with a lot of the remnant buildings, by where that play garden is, by where Bridgepoint building, our remediation plan. And we got that marked at about $800,000 that we'd be looking for from that brownfield development loan. Moving into the really more competitive, higher ticket item grant opportunities that become available. First, we're going to talk about brick. That's all that resilient infrastructure, anything to reduce floodplain damage, floodplain losses. So obviously, a lot of that's going to be looking along the Mississippi River, looking at our wetlands, looking at our stormwater storage. That funding range is anywhere between 10 to 20 million, with a 20% grant match on top of that. Moving back down into more roadway infrastructure, there's build, implementation, not design and engineering this time. So we applied for build in the past, looking at some of the more internal design and engineering. Didn't quite pan out for us, but there is a secondary implementation portion of that. Funds anywhere between 5 and 15 or $25 million at a 20% grant match. 20% grant match. So we'd be looking at more existing roadway infrastructure right now for that, and safety improvements there to focus on the transit-oriented stuff.
So maybe like thinking about Gateway with build, because we're looking at that a little further out. So thinking about connecting the Gateway to River Drive and making those kinds of connections, which seems to be more in line with what build is currently funding, rather than redevelopment. Their focus is really hard on roads and safety. So our internal redevelopment project is not hitting safety because we don't have any safety data. We can't show that this is an unsafe
space because we don't have drivers, we don't have accidents, we don't have any data. So, we haven't done the debrief on that yet, but I'm sure that that's gonna be kind of what they're gonna say, but I still think there's an opportunity for build down the road, and I don't wanna dismiss the opportunity. It is large money, and, you know, if we can work out, you know, an implementation on that, I still think that that's, feasible,
I just want to point out to the council, if you weren't aware, you know, Rock Island applied 3 or 4 times before they got 5. Oh, holy cow. I think East Moline was one of the earliest ones. I don't know how many times they applied, but so I'm not surprised.
I mean,
I know it's disappointing when you put so much work into it.
It is. It was a hard one to swallow, but I do think it's just, it boils down to the safety and not meeting their criteria.
Definitely one of the most competitive grants out there for transportation projects. Being cognizant of time to talk through the last 2 grants that we have listed fairly quickly. First is the EDA Public Works Grant. That one has a pretty broad scope. It's public infrastructure that goes towards job creation and public investment. So if you look at the map, you'll see public infrastructure that goes towards job creation and public investment. So we'll identify and narrow down a scope that we're looking to apply for in the grant. Something that's appealing to us is that it does pay for parking facilities, which would be great for our structured parking ramps within the development. That's a huge cost that not a lot of people want to take on. And then lastly, there is OSLAD, Parks Grant, Park Development, Park Adjacent Structures. So where we see the play gardens, the water feature, that's funding up to $600,000 we can look for. Going back to EDA Public Works just briefly, the match requirements for that are actually variable. And although it is unfortunate for us that this is in an economically distressed environment, for the purposes of the grant application, that actually reduces our grant match by a pretty significant margin, from 50% down to 20%.
Yeah, possibly.
Possibly down to 20%.
And we're looking at that one, like, it's a rolling application that's currently open, so we're gonna start working on that one again, assuming, this, you know, budget gets approved. So we haven't, dove in yet, but we're ready.
And to wrap up, really, the adopted River Zone plan as it stands is really dependent on aligning the revenue plan that Carol will go over with soon to execute the vision properly, even with the additional geo bonding and the additional funding from Build Moline. Without adhering to the revenue plan as proposed, we run the risk of not being able to cover the bond issuance, bond payments in a way that moves the needle enough to get us the private dollars of public investment and grant match dollars that we need to make this project a success. So on that cheery note, I'll turn it over to Carol.
So to summarize, and I know it's getting kind of late, but I think I can wrap it up in about 10 minutes to make sure you have a feel for it. I have a revised schedule put out in your sentence. Just walk through just very briefly and talk about opportunities to talk about it. The very first cover letter. First of all, the revised handout is a long spreadsheet. Runs everything that was just presented in the PowerPoint. So this is the one way that we can do funding now. However, as Daniel said, to do that, we need to affirm council's commitment to the special CIP projects fund in general, as well as the urban development. And what that means is just go down the list. And that is to show that commitment. We need to grow our existing revenue streams actively and seek grants as well as issue GO. So I want to walk through that in the plan. What I've done, I hope you don't mind, it's handwritten on a spreadsheet. Just so it's easier for you guys to kind of just see how it flows. Number 1 is our $200,000 annual increase in property taxes that is going to provide additional revenue to this fund. Last year, we took a year off. If you remember, we adopted the budget. And actually, well, it's a two-edged sword because handout number 2 just got this information after the state of Pakistan. This is gonna require some further discussion. We're gonna have this one here. We just got our statutory minimum required contribution. Now, for our fire pension fund, it is going up. And it's attached, the actual copies of the statutory minimum are attached. Fire is going up 25%, police is going up 8%. The general levy for our CIP, I'm basically holding the same. Currently, it is at 724 to be that 26, rounded up to 740, basically 15,000. And then our debt levy, and that's just P&I on those pension obligation amounts, is at 32,000. It's just a schedule. That brings us up to 4.94%, which is just underneath our the cap. I mean, for a public hearing, statutory cap. I will say this as part of that. I'm already working with the Parks Department and Library. We're going to need to ask them to stand down for additional money for that year. We're going to have to look at some additional transfers in the general budget. I'm still working through all that, but we will find a way. It's going to be in 1 year. Just knowing going into this budget, we are looking at a minimum levy rate of probably $857.
Thank you, Your Honor. I will vote for any levy that captures more than 50. Very consistent. I also think it's really important we look at this. You know, we have made decisions of putting certain things into our property tax category that we know are going to be consistent and are going to, frankly, eat up most of that. We have to cover the parks, the public library, fire pension, police pension, we could do that as well. But I think it's also important for us to look at this and realize that this funding for any of those can come from outside property tax. So I mean, obviously, it's going to be a longer conversation about all of the changes and additions. But I think to say that we can only pay for these things if we do it with property tax levy is not true. You are saying that, but it's. I just want to make sure that we're knowing that's not a limitation that exists. That's just sort of how we have cut up the pie and decided something. So we can change that at any time as we need to, based on the large increases that our government needs.
And remember, as we progress through the budget, we're looking at all alternative revenue sources, including potential increases that could be reallocated. But I just want to give you a heads up. I am not recommending, because we don't have planning for the CIP that's built into this plan. Number one, we are holding up on property tax increase until January 1 of 28, not 27. We come back in September at the roundtable. I am hoping that we have assessed values from the assessor, so we will have a better figure on the growth. Right now, all I have is potentially to meet the requirement that's required for the pensions. I'm going to apply through the rest of these. Number 2 is our gas and electric franchise. We talked about this as well. We are currently at 30%. In order for this plan to work, have to raise it to 4% and 5% by the year 2030. That's this plan. There could be other plans. I'm just saying I can make it work if we follow this plan. What these mean is number 1, I'm going to go back to number 1, that property tax increase. If going forward past 28, every year we would increase those rates. Only this portion of the taxes. For the riverfront, 200,000, it would mean 75 cents per month or $9 a year for our residents. To do that 200,000 every year for the next 10 years. Looking at the gas and electric, if we raise it to the 4 and then to the 5, for every 1%, it does translate to $1.65 a month. So it is more in franchise fees. $19.80 on an annual basis. Again, there's 2 hits, and then it would just stay that way, because 5% is our maximum. So we're gonna be going through this several times for the next months. I just wanted to get this out. Having these fees in place then allows us to issue the $10 billion, number 3, and it's 2027. Allows us to issue $10 million in GO bonds. Keeping those fees in place and property taxes will pay for principal interest payments. And someone said that, but we have to pay for those. If we don't pay for them through alternative revenue sources, which is our plan, the county will issue bonds. They will simply assess, because of the bond ordinances, they will tack it on to us. So I mean, we will have a plan that will follow. Number 4 is we'll want to continue our $215,000 transfer in from cannabis. In September, I'm going to go through that. Right now, I need a little more history. But it's crazy. We are at a 3% reduction in this. It is up. Product selling is up, but the merchants are lowering their prices because the market is getting so saturated. And so the state, as well as the city, they're just getting a less of a piece of the pie. Its profits overall are going down. The product is still selling. But I'll have more on that for the discussion.
Isn't there statewide legislation to get rid of like the THC alpha that's probably eating the slightly not legal or the slightly legal products that are stealing revenue share from the dispensary?
Yeah, actually, I know a lot of people that know more about the industry than I do think that, and I've read quite a bit about it. And questionably legal, I think, is a good way to describe it. And that, I think, is why Congress and the General Assembly both passed laws to make it a little clearer what exactly the legal requirements are. And I think that by next year, we should start to see the effects of that. And maybe we will see a mini boom in the legal cannabis industry because of not having that particular competitor as widespread in Illinois.
So there might be a horizon.
Is there a world where we take control as a home rule and pass rules about the slave daily stuff and their presence in our town? We balance out the competitiveness ourselves.
The difficulty that I see with us taking action that we would enforce ourselves is that many of the things we would do require testing, chemical testing of the products in order to be able to prove. It would be our burden to prove that it wasn't legal. That would be substantial costs if we pursued any substantial number of cases. I really like the idea in this case. I don't usually say this, but I really like the idea of letting state government take care of it. Generally, if your plan is to let state government take care of it, you're not really planning. But this one, I think, is good.
Could take care of it like licensing and fees that we are doing with the different tobacco licensing or.
I'd be curious to see what you'd have to say about when you get a little more detail on what our income level is for this year, like through July, because then it will have been 3 years total that we've done it. So comparatively, well, not really soon.
And we can kind of give.
But the other thing is, like, we just have to look at what we're funding already, but and we have to come back on certain things that come from that.
I'm all for us taking action, take steps against those questionable illegal products.
However, I think if the state doesn't step in, it's not gonna help in a financial sense. In fact, I think it would only negatively impact us, right? Not too much, but that's a trade-off. But if the state doesn't do it, then people are just gonna drive to Rock Island or East Moline for their question. So in that case, I think that is what we won't reap any financial benefits. It's that way.
We'll have a lot more events in September. Right now, we're wanting to create that 215,000 in the plan here to fund the riverfront estimates. We are going to continue the annual 500,000 from use of tax and fiber. That's in our. Don mentioned, and we are seeking out the ITEP grant. We are looking at that for 2028. That would be a $5 million grant. $1,250,000 city match. And this, I need you to look at my numbers. You follow 28 down the road. You will see $5 million in revenue. You see that? $5 million. Now follow it down. And you will see our infrastructure, which is normally $2 million a year, being reduced to 750, making $1,250,000 for that grant.
Oh, I see. The extra 2 million we put in for streets and all your.
Just the one time, and then it goes right back.
Yeah,
Just the one
I can understand that.
You're like, please understand. I get it.
But it's still infrastructure.
It is.
So, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and that's why we all kind of talk about that. But that's in here. The next one is, as Don mentioned, we are seeking out that IDPA forgivable loan. That's number 7. You'll see it, the combination 426. And then in May of 27, we are looking at, as we've been talking about, bonding for $27 million finally for our fire station. Number 8. On the expenditure side, then, those revenues, if they indeed are intact and all in place, provides the following. Number 9, gets us in 2026, the current year, demolition of Bridge Point, targeted $2 million. That's going to be determined based on bids that are going to be coming in, but we think 2 million will come close to covering it. But it does cover it. Also in 26, we talked about the Moline's Wonderful program. You'll see that on my sheet number 10, close to the bottom. There's your $500,000. We originally had talked, and we'll talk more about this in September as well, that potentially what we will do with this program is transfer it out to our revolving loan program and have that be kind of under that umbrella. There's also $250,000 in that revolving. So that 250 plus 500 is, but that would be managed under a separate umbrella. It won't come out of our special CIP.
Okay.
Next.
The revolving loan fund is intact. So it's 50,000 is the, and so we've already started with loan packages. So that's kind of a well-oiled machine that's working. We'll make a long about that already. Process and application.
Next is number 11. And you'll look clear to the side, right hand part, $22 million in riverfront projects. This is what was just discussed, the $10 million bonding plus the $12 million of grants, $22 million. I have buckets of money there. You'll see 4 million, 6 million, 6 million. We don't know precisely what that cash flow is going to be. The buckets primarily line up what Chris just presented to you. Questions on that? Next, 13. In 2027 is where we have the improved facilities on the expenditure side. So you look at the bottom, close to the bottom of the page, you will see $27 million that is going to be paid out for the fire station to build it. On line 21 of the big spreadsheet, line 21, number 13. And then in addition, we have earmarked the remodel of the city chambers.
I continue to be a thumbs down on that. There's so much stuff. If it was the air conditioning that's a problem and other, key components to this building, I personally understand it more, but we're functioning. It's not ideal. We're functioning. We have to get this thing. I don't know what anybody. Sorry, I spoke. Yes, it's tax rate.
I agree with you. I think that that's not one of my priorities.
I personally think we have not been heard. We did not want to move forward with stuff in this hearing. But we're glad
And so what I will do then is are you wanting me to remove that $500,000, we'll put it up, it'll be out in that highlighted yellow, which is going to the riverfront for whatever we're needing and to go towards.
Those are strictly for remodels. That's not for like maintenance or anything like that, correct? But it's strictly for that remodels. I guess that's it.
I definitely agree. Some changes. I don't think we can move with that piece of the puzzle. I think there were other building upgrades, and there may be others still that we do have to deal with. Security, health, and all that. I mean, making the building function, but I think that's not. I think that would be a great thing to cover up this, reducing the property tax.
We are good with the building.
Okay, and then the very last one is, we do have in there number 14, my handwriting, $850,000 in 26 and $850,000 in 27 for the design and schematics. So if you look down to 27, that's kind of the proposed right now. Revenues and expenditures have potentially to be adopting. But as we circle back in September, we're going to talk about it a little bit more before we actually finalize that budget. For your information, just bear with me. Yes, sorry.
Or I guess when we're talking about securing the bonds and pushing those forwards, I am usually the person who refuses to approve a fee increase before we have to actually do it. Like I will say, no, we're not signing off on that 2 years out. We'll sign off on it in a year when it's kind of that time. When we approach this, and we're trying to represent that financial readiness, I think that'd be something we can, I think, get ahead of and say we are planning 2 years out, because we're trying to demonstrate that readiness. So, because I think we did that some with some of our utility funding when we were getting ready for certain loans, and we had to do it a little further in advance. Whereas usually I like to wait for the last minute to say yes to a fee and build our 3-year budget on it. But let's not sign off on it over there. But I just think that's something we can think of a little differently when we're demonstrating our readiness for grants.
It's important.
Yeah,
Because we have to provide that documentation that this money is available and secured, that it's approved by council, like that is something that has to be provided on the grant.
and I'm often curmudgeonly on this one, but I feel cooperate in this case.
So that's gonna make the worksheet very, very easy. I've never really provided to you. What happens if we don't do the taxes, property taxes, and we don't do the franchise fees? Go to the last page, right there, you'll see the first two yellow highlights, 740,000, you see 740, 27, everybody? Yep. Now follow it across. That would be freezing the property taxes. Okay, I'm not recommending that, just saying, what if we did that? Then what if on the line number 4, the franchise fees, we're gonna freeze that too. In 2028, if Mid-America raises their rate, it's still frozen. See the 1,000,008 going across the board. What does that do to us? The bottom right-hand corner, we're now 11.6 in the total, which means we would have to look primarily. See my handwriting here. Currently, we've got 22 million allocated for our CIP infrastructure projects. We're trying to allocate 2 million a year of the 3. That's the we would have to reduce 12 million out of that line for a combination of the riverfront at 5.8. Combination of those, we would have to cut 12 million somewhere to break this fund even. Or we have to defer the fire station. Just maybe a few more things to do. I'm saying if you, it's the cumulative effect that those revenue streams give us. Every year building upon each other, that makes this program work. If we stand down and don't do it,
And Mr. Carr, even though we don't know what private development numbers in your chart will be, if we're doing things well and we can attract people, that will certainly reduce what our need is for that bottom line.
absolutely.
Trying to present to start this way. Right?
Oh,
Then
yeah,
the
I-
economic development package should get in there. Yeah. Economic development impact for sure.
Oh, and the other thing that matters too is like what are the terms of the bonding in terms of the years,
Right,
all of that, so.
right now, I'm just telling you quickly, there's a lot more discussion to come on that. The way we proposed it was for 15 years and it's at 4.25%.
Yeah, I think just to echo what you're saying, when we did strategic planning last year, I was adamant that we increased the population by 5%. Bill Moline won't do that, but it is a piece, 10 properties is gonna make it, but 10 properties plus 400 here, plus 50 there. It's really vital that we focus on increasing population, because then these numbers in 5 years will be very easy to measure. Yeah. Even if we're just getting back up to 1986 levels.
A lot of ground to make up.
46,000. I mean, 3,000 people is make a big difference. Yeah.
This is a path that can help you get there. I can tweak it here. But I think there's really an opportunity to jumpstart.
Anything further on our reports? Hearing none, is there any further public comments? None miscellaneous business, I have none.
I went to a groundbreaking today for the YMCA with the mayor, who doesn't want to mention it, but no, it was starting on the new facility. It's a great community partnership. I'm glad that they've chosen Moline 3 times in their history, and I'm glad to be still here. And it's a great investment.
Staff.
I'll just say, as you can see from tonight, we had a couple of top-notch interns this summer, and it's always kind of a journey with the interns and how that program will go. But I just wanted to also thank the staff for sharing your expertise with the next generation.
Any other staff? None, we need a motion to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
No one's in favor.